Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
We can meet our destiny to build a land here that will be for all mankind a shining city on a hill.
You're listening to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show, only on Revolution Radio. Now, here are your hosts, Jim White and Jason Van Tatenhove.
Crusade for freedom is your chance and mine to fight communism.
Please hang up and try again.
Rob Dew is a news director for Infowars.com and the Infowars Nightly News. In 2010, he co-directed with Alex Jones Police State 4, The Rise of FEMA, a hard-hitting documentary which covers the FEMA internment camp plan, the Pittsburgh G20 protests where the police and military used sound cannons on the American people for the first time, and covers the false flag terror known as the underwear bomber, which was the pretext to put radiation-spewing naked body scanners in our airports and has evolved into the TSA putting their hands in our pants. Rob is a graduate of West Virginia University with a BFA in theater, and that is the place where he first started writing about the left-right paradigm, much to the dismay of his liberal editors. Rob Dew, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon on the Liberty Brothers.
It's an honor. What have you guys been talking about today?
Well, you know, we've been talking about this whole, of course, the whole Ferguson thing. Of course, that's a powder keg waiting to happen.
Yes.
And now the Amnesty thing. I mean, those are the two big things right now that are really on the plate, and that's it's misdirection. As you know, it happens all the time.
Right. Last Friday, I actually I got with Leanne McAdoo. She was doing the news, and I said, look, you need to do a segment talking about how he's going to come out with amnesty, and then the Ferguson riots are going to erupt because they're going to release that decision to coincide with the amnesty plan, and that's his smokescreen. They did this last time. There was violence in Ferguson. They were using that to cover up a situation. Anytime there's something going on, they want to take the eye of the people away from that and force feed something else, usually a side issue. Not that Ferguson's not a side issue, but I think compared to the immigration reform that's going to be passed or be implemented, it's a bigger deal. I think the immigration thing, people really need to be concerned about that because it's going to literally open the floodgates.
It is, and unfortunately, he's the only place he's announcing it seems is going to be on the Grammys. It seems like they're just kind of trying to hide it as much as they can. And then I do agree with you. I think that the Ferguson verdict's going to come down and it is going to just explode and take everyone's attention away from it, and everyone's going to forget about it. It's going to be very convenient.
And looking at Ferguson, I don't know if you guys were watching some of our Ustream feeds last night. They actually were in the middle of streaming and it just cut off. And it happened to a bunch of Ustream accounts. I didn't verify that personally, but others are telling me that they were watching several feeds and they all went off at the same time. So it looks like they're testing some cell blocking technology out there now. So I think we're going to see that come into play, which is why it's important that in addition to you streaming, you also need to be shooting stuff on cards because you never know when they can just come in and say, hey, your iPhones don't work anymore.
Yeah, that's very true. We were down at Bundy Ranch, Jim and I both, and there were definitely quite a few times that it seemed like we just couldn't get cell service to work where it had worked, previously an hour ago. So I wouldn't doubt it one bit. How do you think it's going to play out? Do you think it's going to be just located in the St. Louis area? Or do you think it's actually going to replicate out? I mean, I've heard numbers as high as 86 cities that they're going to have different protests in. How far do you think it's going to go?
I think they've been planning this for so long and they've been hyping this for so long. There's going to be a lot of angry people out there. So I think it's going to go. It's going to start in the St. Louis area and quickly move to other cities. Biggs is getting intelligence and he's been talking to a lot of people on the ground, a lot of activists that have come from outside of St. Louis into the area. I'm talking about Joe Biggs, and who's on the ground right now up in Ferguson. And he's saying that in L.A. they're planning stuff they said is going to make the L.A. riots back in the 90s look like a cakewalk. So
wow.
It's really scary to think about this, that people can just, a switch gets flipped and then people just go all out nuts. What I would like to see is all these people take this energy and go down to their nearest Federal Reserve and start saying, "In the Fed." That, I think, is the kind of stuff we need to get across to people. These are the people that are really controlling what's going on in America, is the Federal Reserve. It's not the cop on the beat. These guys really are caught between a rock and a hard place, and there are bad cops, and the bad cops should be singled out and taken care of. But you can't paint them with a broad brush.
Rob, I think they're waiting for an excuse, of course, to implement martial law. Do you see something like this here at Ferguson? This is going to be the one where they're going to do the nationwide martial law, or do you think they're going to maybe just lock down and just have a real strong police presence like they look like they're ramping up for?
Well, it's hard to say because you always think one thing is going to set it off. But if it does spread, yeah, you're going to see, I think, isolated pockets of martial law where they go in, shut down areas, and then first thing they do is go door to door, grabbing guns, and we've proven that time and time again. Watertown was the last one where they did a small area and went door to door. They weren't confiscating guns necessarily, but they were barging into people's homes, kicking people out of their homes, pointing guns at, just general citizens, looking for one 19-year-old kid who I don't think had that much to do with the Boston bombing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it seemed like people were so submissive that it didn't matter. They just let them run right through their homes and totally shred their constitutional rights. And one of the other things we saw with what happened in Ferguson last time, the alternative media really was kind of singled out, and it seemed like they were specifically targeting you guys and other alternative news outlets to shoot rubber bullets at, to really it seemed like there's a new paradigm kind of going on with these engagements, that they are now targeting alternative media, and that if you don't have a big $80,000 camera on your shoulder, that you're treated differently, even though you may have a bigger reach than CNN.
Well, even the people that had big cameras, I think it was Al Jazeera that Jakari was standing behind while they were getting shot at, and then they shot tear gas at them, and they ran off, and then they started dismantling their equipment. And they're like, "Oh, we were helping them." That was the cops the next day. We're don't run, we are your friends, as they're shooting tear gas at them. So I think they are singling. I think they're singling out anybody that's going to be in the area. I don't think anyone's safe. If it goes down, and I'm saying when because I'm almost positive they're not going to indict this cop. I don't think there's going to be an indictment handed down, and I think everybody knows that. I think they've probably known that for a while, which is why they're gearing up with all this police state apparatus that you're going to see. You're going to see it full blown again, and it's sad.
Rob, switching gears a little bit, if you could tell us a little bit about your process of awakening. Did you choose alternative media, or like maybe a lot of the rest of it sort of chose you? There was an event that maybe that transpired that you maybe were curious about or started looking into more. Tell us a little bit about your awakening, if you don't mind.
Sure. I think it was a long process. It wasn't one event. I was definitely awake before 9/11. I was in college from like 94 to 98, and just seeing the little kind of corruption things that go on in a university type atmosphere. I was working for the paper, and I would bring up ideas and stuff, and if it was against Bill Clinton, those ideas were shot down really quickly. And a couple things happened while I was there. One, I was in a used bookstore one day, and I grabbed two books, and they sit on my desk right now. One was called None Dare Call It Conspiracy, and the other one was called it was by the Ralph Nader Congress Project, and it was called Who Runs Congress? And I didn't understand as much from None Dare Call It Conspiracy because it was more worldly based. It kind of gives you a whole picture of the world, whereas Who Runs Congress is like looking at specific instances in Congress, how people were getting paid off to do things. They were talking about this scandal with the price of milk that happened in the 70s. And it was a lot of little instances where you can see, look, they're working together. They're all working together against the American people. And then on this worldly level with the Council on Foreign Relations and stuff, I wasn't quite prepared for all that information, but it was like a good premise. So whenever I would hear those words, I'd kind of poke my head. I'm like, oh, they do exist. And then later on, when I moved to Austin, I turned on the radio one day, and there's this guy screaming and yelling about the stuff that I'd read about. And his name was Alex Jones, and this was in '98, the summer of '98. And so I quickly became a big fan of his, just because he was talking like nobody else out there. I mean, he was really, and back in the '90s, he was as amped as he is now, but just hearing him through the radio and hearing it on terrestrial radio was a big kind of shakeup for me, like going, wow, people are really getting into this. And then, meeting people. I was a musician and trying to be a filmmaker at the time, and we were doing definitely some anti-government work out back then in the early 2000s. And then, when 9/11 hit, I remember going to watch 9/11 Road to Tyranny, which was at the Alamo Draft House, and I went with my friend. And it wasn't even the 9/11 information, because I already knew that was an inside job. But it was watching the stuff from Oklahoma City, all of the VHS tapes that Alex had been sent of the newscast, where they were talking about the second and third bomb that they found that were bigger than the first bomb. The governor was talking about it. They were repeating it over and over again. They're showing the bomb truck drive up to the building. Then they're showing the bomb disposal truck leave. And I think, those kind of events, those years in the early 2000s really kind of got me going. And, I had various media jobs, and one day I answered a Craigslist ad, and lo and behold, it was for, coming to work for Infowars, and that was in February of 2009. So I've been here since then. And, now I could kind of see a lot of the stuff that happens. I see the playbook, like with this Amnesty, calling the Amnesty and the Ferguson riots, just seeing the two events that would seemingly be unrelated to each other, but they're going to be used to kind of cancel each other out and just keep misdirecting people, which is what, these guys do on the left and right.
Rob, it seems like there are so many distractions out there, and one of the things that's really got me worried is this silence, this media blackout we seem to be having on the Ebola situation. Now we've heard about the patients being disappeared out of Kansas City and elsewhere. The lady who just died with hemorrhaging happening out of her nose and mouth at a beauty salon in New York City. We spoke with Dave Hodges last week, and he's put together some computer modeling that his theory is that the economy can't take the hit of us not having a good holiday season this year, so they've really kind of put it under wraps, and come after January 1st, things are going to get real bad real quick. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that might have a possibility of happening? What do you think?
I definitely think they are covering stuff up. I get a lot of the whistleblower, I think it's whistleblowers at Infowars.com, that comes directly into my email, and I read those religiously. And I've gotten so many tips from places saying, hey, we've got a confirmed case, but nobody's talking about it. We're told not to talk about it. And I'll call the hospital, and the PR person, oh, no, we don't know what you're talking about. Nobody here with Ebola. And one in particular case was the guy said they were on a plane, and they made a emergency landing into South Carolina, took him to a hospital. I think it was South Carolina, or it was Tennessee, Kentucky area, somewhere on the East Coast. They make an emergency landing, and that was on the paper because they thought the guy had Ebola. He was vomiting on the plane. And then the guy who was giving me this information said he has a code name, and he gave me the code name, and then he said he was staying at this hospital. I called the hospital, like, oh no, didn't you read the papers? They let him out. He didn't have Ebola. And I called the guy back, and I said, hey, they said they let him out. And they're like, no, he's over here on this floor. Here's his room number, and this is the code name. And I called the lady back and leave several messages, and she never bothers to return my calls, even though the first time it was right away, same day service. She's letting me know that there's nothing to be afraid of. So I think it's a coordinated effort. The medical community has its own kind of brotherhood, sort of like all these other, bigger professions. And I think they've got, just like they push vaccines, they're going to hide Ebola. And it's just one of those things where, I think by the time it comes out, it's going to be, too late to do anything. But also, I think compare us to Africa, our hygienic standards are a lot higher. We have, sewage, we have running water. A lot of these places don't have that. So I don't know if it's going to spread as far as it could, unless it's another weird mutated form, which they've had. They've said this thing keeps mutating. So, I mean, there's a lot to think about there. I also got an email from a guy who's been in retail for 18 years, and this one came in yesterday. He said this is the slowest season he's ever seen. So your points to the economy do ring true with that, where they're trying to, milk as much out of us at this last moment, and then, let the hammer drop in the new year. And, I've been around for a while, so I've heard people say doomsday, and it doesn't happen. So I kind of err on the side of we are a pretty big ship, and it'll take a lot to dismantle this economy. But, we saw it happen in 2008 with just, some banks and the mortgage companies running roughshod over us.
Well, Rob, let me ask you this real quick. You talk about that you're getting in all these show tips and whatnot. How important is it? I mean, are you getting a lot of disinformation and people trying to throw you on the wrong track to get you guys to, obviously there's got to be some of that going on.
Yeah, well, I mean, I get a lot of stuff about people. I probably shouldn't even say this because I'll probably get more of them. People who feel they're being followed and stalked, which they may be, but usually those cases end up just, are people that are paranoid.
Right.
But, I've seen a lot of weird stuff around here, but like disinformation, I can kind of sniff it out pretty quickly. You can tell by the way people write. You can really tell a lot in how they put out their information, the way they organize it. And, it takes a couple of phone calls or just a couple of internet searches to look and see if people are, trying to lead you the wrong direction. I have yet to stumble into something that I think was totally wrong. Interestingly enough, you guys are in Montana. Remember Hardin, Montana, a few years ago?
Yeah, I do remember that.
That was actually in Police State 4 as well. We had that prison company that came in and was, bought off the local reporter with a car and a nice salary, and I forget her name, Becky Shea, maybe that was her name. And, Alex and Aaron Dykes and Rob Jacobson went up there to investigate. And, this prison looks Mac, it looks brand spanking new, and it's in the middle of nowhere. And then I get another email just recently about somebody that said a new company's taken it over. I was actually looking for it before we started, and I'll see if I can find that during a break or something. And I'll actually throw the information out there. Maybe some people can help us out and do their own investigations on it, because apparently a new company's taken over. There's rumors that there's an underground prison at this facility. I remember when Alex actually shot some footage when nobody was watching him. There's he's looking through these blueprints, and one of them says alien detention area. So, that's always been the worry, that they were going to roll out the FEMA camps in order to house illegal aliens. And we're seeing prisons and other places being converted into areas to house illegals, where the press is not being allowed to admit it. But they have TVs and they have ping pong. It's a resort. Come on in. And we got free movies.
Well, I'll definitely go check it out. I mean, that's something that I don't think I'm that far off from, and maybe me and Jim can even drive down there and see what's going on. Sounds like a good story.
Where are you guys at in Montana?
Jim's up in Flathead Valley, and I'm actually out of Butte, so we kind of north and south between the two of us.
Yeah, I've been to Missoula, and a great city, and we drove up to the north a little ways, and there's a beautiful lake up there. I forget the name of it.
Flathead, probably.
Probably Flathead, yeah. I mean, amazing stuff. Went to some hot springs while we were there. It's a really beautiful country there. And there's a church up there near the Mission Mountains that is amazing if anybody's ever in that area. I'll look up the name of that church, but it has some amazing paintings on the wall. And it's in the middle of nowhere. You're just driving along, and that was one of the tourist destinations. And it's kind of this old red brick church, and you go inside, just some amazing, amazing artwork that the monks and the clergy did back, several hundred years ago, or at least a couple hundred years ago, whenever it was built. So,
Rob, you guys have been really on the forefront in a lot of ways as far as carving the path and being at the tip of the spear. One of the things I really enjoy you guys do over there at Infowars is your contests. Talk a little bit about those contests and how effective have they been at just waking people up? And what was your favorite contest? I like the Obama poster one, was pretty good. Which one, do you have a favorite of the contests that you guys have ran there at Infowars?
Wow. Trying to think of which one I was in charge. I was in charge of one of the contests, and I saw some good. I think the most effective one was that $100,000 movie contest. I think was the most effective because we got a lot of entries and a lot of really good entries and a lot of mediocre ones, but we got a lot of good ones. I was in charge of the reporter contest, actually, the first one that we ran, and that was really interesting, watching people put reports together. And I'd get some in and I'd send them some feedback like, hey, next time try this, and this is a good idea for a report as well. And then you'd see them work on another report and send it in, and just because I think that's where the future is going to be. It's going to be the guy with his cell phone going out, and we're already there. I mean, that's not hard to call, but you're going to see more of that in a more organized way. And I think with what We Are Change has done and what we've done, and other groups out there where they've got people in different areas of the country that when something breaks, you got to have somebody there. So the best way to do it is to have lots of people sort of on standby, and when something happens, you activate those people and get them out there, record it. You can do it with a cell phone now and upload your stuff immediately. So it's pretty amazing from where the technology has gone. When I first got into video, it was mini DV was the standard. It was 720 by 480. That's pixels, and now it's 4K, and you can shoot 4K on objects that are smaller than my mini DV camera now. So I just think as the technology gets better, I think we still need to hold on to the old technology, because I think the one thing I don't really like is this new tapeless format that everybody's gone to. Everybody's gone to memory cards. So if your stuff gets hacked, or if your hard drive suddenly craps out, you've lost years of work. I mean, I back up my hard drives, but all it takes is, I could lose 2 weeks worth of work if I haven't backed up at that time, and who knows what in that 2 weeks I could have lost. So I'm sort of at odds with this new paradigm of tapeless video acquisition, and I'd rather see something a little more permanent that doesn't depend on electricity to be accessed again. You can access it by tape and it'll always be there. So that's just my little soapbox on that. But going back, the film contest I think was our most successful, and it was, for me, I kind of helped on the periphery. David Knight really took the lead on that, and watched a bunch of videos. We had a rating system that we put together, but they're all interesting in their own way, and seeing what people do. This last contest, we had a lady who worked for the post office who put stamps on all of the flyers and put them in people's mailboxes, and I thought that was ingenious. We've never had anybody do that before. But, who's saying that you can't take a couple $100, put a bunch of stamps on things, and just go inform people in your area about whatever, the raw milk being sold in your area. I mean, I think I feel like a drug dealer sometimes, because I'm shipping raw milk around my neighborhoods to people, and it's quote unquote, I guess it's legal, but the way they set up the whole system, it's just not very advantageous for people to do it. You really have to know. You almost have to go to the farm and get it yourself. And do you have a lot of raw milk up in Montana?
In Montana, I haven't found any. In Colorado, I just moved up here from northern Colorado last January, and up there, I had in order to get raw milk in Colorado, my wife has had Crohn's disease for the 20 years we've been together, and the kefir that we would make from the raw milk really did a lot of good things for her gut flora. So we actually had to buy a share of a cow.
Yes.
With a contract and everything, and that allowed us to go and legally purchase the raw milk there in Colorado. But here in Montana, unfortunately in this area, I haven't been able to find much of anything other than trying to find a local small farmer that might be willing to do it.
Right.
Jim, do you have anything?
Yeah, there is. You can't get it up here, but it's not not on the open. You have to. I hate to say, you have to kind of go underground to get it, really. But yeah, it's available. It's available if you know the right people.
And I tell you what, I was lactose intolerant. I thought, I'd eat cereal, my stomach would start hurting, and I think a lot of it was just my overall diet, years ago. But when I switched to raw milk, no problems whatsoever, nothing. And it's really been amazing. Just that one thing. That, listening to people like Ben Fuchs and Dr. Group and the kind of stuff that they offer on just like vitamin and mineral supplements to take to just, turn your life around. I used to have bald spots in the back of my head in college because I was eating Taco Bell and drinking Mountain Dew, but I didn't know any better. And most people don't know any better. My kids know now, they know what's good and what's bad. And they always, and they have almost an elitist idea of what to eat is. They're like, look at these kids eating their high fructose corn syrup, which is good. I think it's good. It's, you got to train your kids on how to eat properly or they're going to be unhealthy. So that's where I guess it kind of starts.
Well, I know I raise my children to really be kind of preppers and be very aware and awake. And I think we're seeing a generation, these younger kids really are going to be coming up and becoming just incredibly dynamic individuals because they kind of have been awakened at a very early age. And I'm excited to see what that generation is able to do. At the same time, I'm also kind of scared for the world that they'll be living in. I mean, I know I'm certainly teaching my children, safe firearms usage and how to, can food. We do that as a family, how to hunt, right. And fish for food. So, but I do think it's going to be a very dynamic generation.
It is. And the only thing that their Achilles heel is if there's no electricity. And there's no internet. I don't think a lot of kids or a lot of people know what to do with themselves. We've become so reliant on this new technology. Unless you lived the life before the internet, which I did. I used to go look up stuff in the library. I used to save magazines because they had interesting articles in them. And now it's just a general throwaway attitude of, well, I'll just go find it on the internet whenever I want to look at it again. So I think that's where eventually we could see everything just kind of implode if the internet were to be controlled in a way where it's just like a Walmart type internet. Only the giant corporations can fit in and put their stuff out ahead of everybody else's.
That's pretty. Sorry, Jim. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Rob, we've seen mainstream media. I mean, just take an absolute nosedive here. I don't know, over the last few years, certainly. Yeah. Do you see? Is it just a matter? I mean, I know they're like dead men walking. I mean, it's just a matter of time before they start having to, run programs like Infowars. Maybe not necessarily Infowars, but at least more edgy and certainly more truthful than the propaganda that they run now. I mean, they're going to have to make a switch, or they're just going to people are just going to stop watching altogether, don't you think?
Yeah, it's kind of like what happens or what's happening now, and what's been happening for a while with the music industry, as the methods of delivery and creation went to the masses. You saw people not buying as much stuff, and you saw these big companies with giant overheads just being slashed. And now you're seeing that in news, in these cable channel news organizations. CNN, I think, just got booted off the Dish Network.
They did.
And I think the way it was is they wanted Dish to pay to have it on there, and Dish is like, no, you don't have enough viewers to facilitate that. And so that it's the whole... Everything's changing. Everything's becoming more geared toward an individual can now put out news. I mean, how many news stories have been broken by people who aren't with the mainstream media? It may come out through the mainstream media, but it didn't originate with a camera crew and a reporter going out and getting the story. It originated with some guy shooting something on his cell phone or a whistleblower. And now William Binney was a huge whistleblower with the NSA, but nobody talks about him. They just talk about Edward Snowden. But Snowden came along in this era when it was a lot, this type of information, people were hungry for it. People knew it was going on. So it's like we knew the NSA was spying on us, but now we have a name to their program of what it's called. It's called PRISM, or it's called God Eye or God View, whatever Uber's using now to spy on people. So it's just incredible the amount of how fast things change now compared to what they were.
Rob, if you could talk a little bit about how important, and I know they run a lot of your stories there, how important has the Drudge Report become? I know that even mainstream media personalities have admitted that they actually visit the Drudge Report pretty much every day. How much of an impact has Matt Drudge been on not just alternative media, but just the media in general?
I think his influence is probably, we don't even know what his influence is yet. I mean, we know how it's big right now, but I think a few years ago it was big then, but people weren't recognizing it, and now it's like we're recognizing it. And then in 5 years, at the rate he's going, and he's done it really smart. He runs a very low intensive website. There's not a lot of stuff going on. It's just news, and he's got people out there looking for stuff and people sending in tips. And I don't think there's anything, even if a Republican gets in, and I would say Drudge is probably more of a conservative libertarian than, say, a liberal. He's still going to be putting out great stuff, and I don't see him shifting policies or running cover for anybody. He calls it like it is out on all the issues, I think. I mean, he doesn't take a stand on a lot of social issues. I mean, he's reporting on the medical marijuana, and that's the thing. Drudge is kind of he doesn't really say what he feels. He's not an opinion guy. He's strictly news, and he just puts it out there. Although maybe you'll get a little bit of a taste of how he feels in a headline. I think he writes great headlines. And I tell you, we have turned into what we are now as a headline-driven nation, society. I mean, that's what people look at headline. I can pretty much look at the Drudge headlines and know what the articles are going to be about. And I may look at 5 headlines before I even go to an article, and that's just if I'm looking for something specific. Because you can almost tell by the story what is going to be said. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
I mean, that's how when I look at Drudge, I'll look at 15 things and maybe click on 2 articles, but I'll get a whole day's worth of news in 10 minutes while I'm eating my breakfast.
Yep. I start the day, my day the same way.
Yeah, and I think there was a picture on the Drudge Report not too long ago. I think it was either the Grammys or the Oscars, and they showed the control room shot, and on one of the computers there was the Drudge Report. So they were watching the Drudge Report up until they kicked off. I think it was the Grammys. I don't know. I don't really pay much attention to those types of things anymore. But that's how wide his focus is. The White House watches it every day, and other news organizations, they get up and say that's what first thing you do is check Drudge, and that's the one app that works on my phone consistently is the Drudge Report app. So I check that one even before the Infowars app.
Well, Rob, how important do you think this next generation of alternative media that's coming up now, how big of a role are they going to be playing? Is it going to continue to increase? I mean, Infowars has kind of been the 500-pound gorilla that's really taken over. But we are seeing, a lot of people taking that initiative, from your guys is challenging everyone. Hey, do this yourself. Get out there and do it. That's really why me and Jim started this show. How important do you think that's going to be that people step up and fill those shoes in the next few years?
I think it's very important because if people don't do it, you never know who you're going to affect with your podcast or your video. You never know who's going to click on that. It could be, the next Alex Jones who's like 8 years old now, or it could be the guy who's going to be the next Matt Drudge, and it's going to eclipse everything that we've ever worked on with like one video. They'll eclipse it all, and it'll be, 1 billion hits, and boom. I don't know if that'll ever happen, but I think it's a slow process, and I think it's important. There's some guys who entered the reporter contest, and I was just cruising along YouTube one day, and I saw a couple of their faces that I recognized, and I clicked on it, and all three of these guys have their own little internet show that they run off Google Chat. I think it's Google Chat, or Chat Room, whatever it's called. But you had all their cameras. They were all set up in different parts of the country. These guys all entered the reporter contest, and they all did good stuff too. They all had great ideas, and these were patriotic Americans, I guess you could call them. But instead of wasting their time talking about issues of little or no significance, they're talking about issues that I think are big and that I think people need to know more about, especially, the Federal Reserve. And I've been doing a lot of, I was looking back on the Occupy movement. I did a video about Nickelback, and they did, they're calling for a revolution. So you got this giant corporate rock band calling for a revolution, which I think is just so funny that on so many levels that I didn't even get into when I was making it. But when you look back at the Occupy movement and how it was co-opted, and people, I think a lot of the people who were in it had goals in mind to, really change the system. I don't think we're ever going to have a perfect system. There's no way to get that. It's always going to be a struggle. But I think that's what keeps you on your toes. But the summer before Occupy hit off, I went on a 3-city tour with Alex, going to 3 different In the Fed rallies. And the last one we stopped at in San Antonio, pouring rain, and there was at least 200 people there. Probably would have been 3 times as many if there wasn't the rain. But Dallas was huge, Houston was huge, and San Antonio was big considering it was raining. But I think that took a lot of steam out of In the Fed, and it kind of diverted people's attention to the 1%, which most of those people are within the Fed system. But I don't think it's a 1% issue. I think it's even a smaller issue than that. I don't think people who necessarily own factories or own large companies are the problem, because they employ a lot of people. And I think, that's the paradigm that we're in right now. You need people to take that first step and go out and create jobs before you have people with jobs. The government can't create all the jobs.
Rob, switching gears a little bit, we've talked here on the show before about Sandy Hook, and we think that certainly was a false flag orchestrated event with the goal of really disarming us as a population, law-abiding firearm owners. Do you see these type of false flag events, Sandy Hook type events going on? I mean, do you feel the same way that we do, that they really need to disarm us? I mean, they can't really overcome the American population as long as they're armed, or at least a great many of us are armed. Do you care to comment on that?
Yeah, I'll comment on that. One, I believe Sandy. I think there's plenty of evidence that Sandy Hook was an operation. We've had Wolfgang. What's his last name? Halbig. Is that his last name?
Yes, I think that's right.
Wolfgang Halbig. Yeah, I mean, just if you don't look at any of the other evidence and just listen to what he's saying, like who ordered porta potties, why are there no life flight helicopters there? How did they declare everybody dead within 11 minutes? Just those things on their face value you can say, well, this was planned. Nobody is calling out for porta potties when you got kids being shot in an elementary school. There's nobody going, wait, hold on. Let me get lunch and porta potties. I'm going to call that before we send anybody else out there. Nobody does that. No kidding. That's not normal. And when you start looking at these events, you look at the things that aren't normal. And sometimes you can't tell on face value what's normal and what's not normal until somebody looks at it and says, why are they allowing people to walk around the scene? Why are there people going in a circle in this firehouse when you pull back and you speed up the footage? People are literally going in a circle in and out of this firehouse. Who does that? It's just odd. Why are people just walking around in circles doing nothing? When you follow somebody from these long shots. I mean, it's just odd behavior that it really takes, somebody who's, all the detectives on the internet. The internet detectives went in full swing on that one, and I think they did a great job. And not every video out there is 100% correct, but at least people are asking questions, and I think as long as we keep asking questions, going back to your talk about the next generation of people, they have to ask questions. They have to ask why they're being told to do a division problem in 6 steps instead of 2. And they need to start questioning that stuff, because when you just take everything at face value, and especially when you're following quote unquote authority figures, you're going to get led astray. And so that's why it takes people asking questions, analyzing things, taking photographs, putting photographs up for other people to look at. Boston bombing, people were when Anonymous posted all those photos through Cryptome. I mean, that was one of the big breakthroughs, I think, in that, which I think that led to the narrative being changed when they called in a bomb threat into the courthouse. They were going to bring somebody out, and when people were posting photos of lots of different people with black backpacks, especially a lot of military contractor type looking people with black backpacks on, it caused them to change strategy. And then all of a sudden, oh wait, we got these 2 Russian brothers that we're going to make them take the fall for this, who I think had some connection to the CIA at some level, at least the older brother, I think, which is why he didn't make it to trial. And
just interrogations that happened with the people being shot in the top of the head. I mean, come on.
And that guy had knee surgery. Todashev, he had knee surgery. This guy's a threat? You're telling me he's a threat, and he's attacking these agents after they've been interviewing him for 7 hours?
Right.
It just doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. It doesn't make sense that they shoot up the boat trying to kill the guy, and then they do the tracheotomy on him so he can't talk. It's none of that stuff just really makes sense on a lot of different levels. So it's up, but you can't have one person. Just like Alex says, Alex can't see and do everything. You got to have a lot of people. This is everybody's country. Everybody's got to do their part, and you don't have to be a full-time activist. You don't have to be a full-time talk show host. You could do it once a week. You can make 2 videos a week. It's all about continuing the cycle of educating people on what's going on, and taking these events and looking at them and re-looking at them and looking at them again. And then eventually, if you shake the book enough, something's going to pop out. There's going to be that note, that photograph, that memo that pops out that suddenly puts all the things together. Although it's usually not that easy. But by having more people, more eyes, and more people looking at this stuff, I think it does share the load, and it makes for some great detective work that you see out there. There's some amazing videos that people are producing with their home computers. Again, it's not somebody in a military industrial complex setting with it's a guy with a laptop. It's a guy with a phone is doing this stuff now. So it's awesome. I think it's a great time.
No doubt. We had a quick question out of the chat room much earlier. Couple of different questions, but this one was the first one that was asked. They wanted to comment, and we're coming up on the break here in about 3 minutes, so we don't have much time, but the question was asked, who do you think is actually running the government? Obviously we've got the Bilderbergs and whatnot. What are your thoughts on who's actually pulling the strings?
I think a lot of it is in black ops intelligence types and banking entities that are pulling the strings. I was watching a documentary last night on some group that was having trouble with their label, and then their label got bought up by a giant hedge fund, but then that hedge fund couldn't make the payments, and it was swallowed by a giant bank.
Artifact.
But then Artifact.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's a good 30 Seconds of Mars. That's a great documentary. I watched it like 2 nights ago.
I couldn't, just taking the step back and looking at it like, here's a multi-million-dollar company that owns the Beatles, and they can't even stand up to all this stuff going on. They just get bought up and thrown around. That's how these guys, I think these banking entities treat, governments and countries and infrastructures the same way that they, absorb companies. It's just, we don't even count people like you and me. We're not even in the equation. We're not even in the thought process of these people. They're just looking at chunks of whatever, like it's a power plant, it's a dam, it's a highway system, a toll road, They're looking at it in those terms, and they don't even get to a people level. People just kind of get in the way, I think, at a certain level with these guys. So, I mean, I don't think the president runs it. I don't think Congress runs it. No, I think these guys are the actors that we are allowed to be interacting with. But these guys, and they give them all cush lifestyles and great pension plans. But these guys aren't in charge of anything. The laws they make get circumvented by the big boys anyway. They're always exempt from these laws. So you got to look at the people who are exempt, and who the laws don't touch. Who doesn't pay taxes? Giant foundation-run organizations don't pay taxes. Those people are the ones that are really pulling the strings out there, and they don't get voted out of office. We don't even know they exist half the time. Or if we do, it's because they fund NPR or something, and they're a slate at the end of a program, but we don't really know what that really means. So I think that's where you're going to get a lot of maybe the next generation of great whistleblowers will come out of these tax-free foundations and start spilling the beans and grabbing old minutes. Because that's the great thing about the New World Order. They're meticulous record keepers. So people putting that stuff out, I think that you're going to see a whole new crop of information and stuff and revelations about events that we thought we knew the history to. It's suddenly going to be turned on its head.
And you gotta love guys like this. I think his name's James O'Keefe from the Veritas Project. That guy, man, that guy just knocks it out of the park all the time, man. It just, I really appreciate the type of work.
One guy.
You guys had him on the show, I think. Haven't you guys had him on the show?
Oh yeah, we've had him on several times. When we did our midterm coverage, our live midterm coverage, we had him on. We taped an interview with him, and him and Joe Biggs, I think, have a friendly contest going there of who can pull off the best stunt to wake people up, and that's tough to go against O'Keefe. Let me tell you, he's good.
All right, folks, well, stick with us. We're coming up on the break. We'll be back on the other side. We're here with Rob Dew of Infowars.com here on the Liberty Brothers. All right, well, we're back once again, and we have with us Rob Dew of Infowars.com. Where were we before the break, Rob? I wanted to get into a few different things. I actually wanted to talk a little bit about these new Samsung TVs. I know you guys covered this not long ago. I guess it's every TV now, but it's right there in the user's manual and the user's agreement and whatnot, talking about how they're going to record everything you guys are talking about in your own home and possibly, send them off to the highest bidder, whatever third party is out there buying up this information. It just seems like every device in our house that's now a smart device is listening to us, and I don't know, it just doesn't sound very good to me. I gotta wonder who that highest bidder is for that information.
Well, it's a safe, effective way to keep track of us. I think that's what you're going to hear from the giant people like Samsung. Hey, we're just getting it's innocuous data that we're just going to sell to third-party advertisers. Oh, what if the third-party advertisers, the CIA or the NSA?
That's what I'm thinking.
Or your local government. What if they want to keep tabs on you? Say you're somebody that speaks out at city council a lot. We've had the mayor flip off one of our reporters for just going and talking about fluoride. And, so who knows what this could be used for? And I think all these things, you need to look at them and disable what you don't want. Put tape over. I have a tape over my laptop camera, and although they have it now where they can tell what keys you're typing in from the microphone, and they've had that technology for years. But just by it can tell the distance where your hands are hitting, so it can tell what keys you're hitting. I mean,
hey, Rob,
amazing.
did you ever see? Sorry to cut. Did you ever see that? I think you guys might have reported on it. They got this camera now that can shoot at like a chip bag that's sitting on your kitchen table, and they can read the vibrations with a camera from the chip bag and pick up the conversation. Did you see that? Remember that story?
Yeah. I think they were shooting the chip bag with radio waves or something, and then they were able to see it. I think it's technology to see through walls, but that's what the medium that they were using at the time was a chip bag because it had certain elements that they liked in it. But yeah, I do remember that. That was about a month ago or 2 months ago, something like that. But yeah, Leanne McAdoo did a report on the Samsung face scanning TVs, and that's just one of the many things, the Xbox that connect that can tell who's in the room. And all this stuff. Oh, hey, you don't need a remote anymore. You just use your hand to change the channel. It's all supposed to just make your life so much easier. But what they don't realize is all that stuff that's supposed to make it easier is also taking more than what you're getting back. They were offering AT&T. We have that service, ATT Uverse, and they were giving free upgrades to their new gigabit service. And my wife was going to sign up for it. It wasn't going to cost any more money. And then she started reading the user agreement. And basically, they're stealing everything you do so they could put you in an algorithm profile, which is why you're able to get it for free. You're not really getting it for free. They're taking all your information. And they're doing what they want with it. Not that they're not doing that anyway, but at least they're putting it in writing that they are doing it. So it's crazy. And that's, now the Google gigabit Ethernet's coming. That's the new thing. So we're all going to be they're going to be able to suck our information out faster, probably as fast as we can think about it.
Well, Rob, you guys did a story on the Infowars TV last night, talking about just how stupid they seem to think we are as people, and trying to backtrack on what was said about Obamacare. Can you talk a little bit about that story?
Yeah. So it was I did the news last night. I was filling in for Jakari, and I don't do the news that much anymore. So when I go, I try to find a couple, I immediately just start scouring the news that morning looking for stuff. And these two Washington Post articles came across, and the first one is under the fact checker section, and it's called Explainer, What Gruber Meant When He Said If CBO Scored the Mandate as Taxes, the Bill Dies. So here's people are reading this, and the liberals are like, oh, he really didn't mean that it was what he said. And, because everybody, the left and right, were going out and attacking this. And he's trying to say that they were calling it revenue, so it wouldn't be considered taxes, and a shared responsibility payment, using all these words that mean the same thing. It's taxes. Taxes is a shared responsibility payment. It's an involuntary payment, and it's revenue for the government. So he was saying exactly what he meant to say. And then on the same paper, you've got another guy. It's an opinion column from Mark Thason, and it was called "Thanks to Jonathan Gruber for revealing the Obamacare deception." So he's probably a watcher of this show. But just talking about, well, now there's 7 videos of this guy coming out saying, hey, we were doing a screw job against the American people. John Baum put together a video. I think it's called You Lie. And we had it up. Let's see. I'm going to find it real quick. And basically showing people praising this guy back in 2008, 2009, and then they're like, we don't know who he is. Who are you talking about? It's called Obama Caught Red-Handed Lying. And it's a 5-minute video that you should send out to everybody you know who thinks Obamacare is great, because it's not. It's a giant screw job. We get emails from people all over the place that are having their insurance rates going up. And insurance is expensive as it is for what you get. I mean, I don't know what you guys are under, but when I used to get insurance, Blue Cross Blue Shield, I was paying it was like $360 a month for me and my kids, and we had a $5,000 deductible. And you're almost never going to reach that deductible unless you're one of these chronically ill people who like to go to the doctor to get prescription drugs. My wife was under a different form because she worked for a school district, but just to get me to add, if I was to add to her insurance, it was going to cost $500 a month right off the top. And that didn't even count the kids. Just to add me, who goes to the doctor maybe once every 5-6 years. I mean, I haven't been in a long time. And so this is breaking people's backs. We had a guy send in an email saying his insurance per month is more than their house note. That's obscene.
Wow.
That's obscene. And people are going to expect, the government's expecting people to continue to do this. No, people are going to revolt. I opted out of the system. I'm under a group called Samaritan Ministries. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it, but
familiar with it. Familiar with it. Yep.
Man, I tell you what, it works. I pay for the entire family. It's around $400 a month, and the deductible is, and when I say deductible, they don't really call it a deductible, but after $300 per incident, they start covering the costs. And the way it works is we get a newsletter every month that tells us where we send our check to. And we send a check. We write out that check and send it directly to the people who need it, who are paying off their medical bills. It doesn't go to a bureaucracy for some guy to go pay for his vacation or a giant overhead. No, it goes right to the people who have filled out the paperwork, sent it into their organization. They go, okay, this guy gets, he had $5,000 worth of bills. We're going to send him $4,700 back. That's how insurance should work.
That's pretty cool.
It's a very cool thing. Now, they want you to go to church. That's one of their requirements. And so people who don't go to church, there is another option out there. I'm going to do a report on it next week. And it's the solution to Obamacare, essentially. It's these organizations, and these guys they're grandfathered in because they've been around since the 80s and 90s. People started doing this stuff because they were looking at insurance and the way it's structured, and you're paying in way more than you ever get back. At least I know now when I send my money, it's going to somebody who really needs it. It's going to somebody who has had something happen to them. They've paid for it either with a credit card or out of their bank account, and now we're helping them pay that cost back. And that is, I think, the only way we're going to defeat Obamacare is if more of these things crop up or more people get into these types of groups, because they don't call it insurance, quote unquote, but it's the same principle. You pick your doctor you go to, you tell them you don't have insurance, and they always give you. Here's what a lot of people don't know: if you don't have insurance, you're not going to pay nearly as much as what they charge the insurance companies. You tell them, I want to pay cash. What's your cash discount? It's going to be 30 to 40% off of what they normally charge. So say they charge the insurance company $90 when you go to the doctor, and you're paying $15 to $20. Well, if you didn't have insurance, you just went in and paid cash. One, you're not paying that money each month to the insurance company. So if you have some set aside, well, you just pay that instead of, which would be, like $30 or $40 instead of the $90 that goes to the insurance company. And it's basically just a bunch of paper pushers. If people go into a hospital now, all it is paperwork. It's a lot of paperwork shuffling, a lot of checking off charts, not a lot of health care going on in the healthcare system. A lot of keeping people on prescription drugs, not talking about diet, not talking about natural things you could do. No, just a lot of paper pushing and a lot of big pharma prescribing. That's my big beef with the medical industry. And that's why I don't think people, these people who are like, I have to have insurance. I always hear about people crying about their insurance. I didn't have insurance for many years because I didn't live a lifestyle that needed medical insurance. Now, if something happened, I'd have been SOL. But nothing happened to me, and I was able to, once I started having a family, everybody puts pressure on you to get insurance of some sort. But I think this Samaritan Ministries is an amazing organization, and God bless them for what they do and the way they structure it, and for having standards too. They do have. They don't take everybody. They have standards that they set up, and I think it's every right for every organization to set up their standards the way they want to do it. You either meet their standards or you don't meet those standards. And
Rob,
you go find something else.
I've got a listener that is Skyping me, asking me can you please repeat that once again? And I know you said you're going to write an article about it. It's Samaritan. Just repeat it again if you don't mind.
I'm going to look up the address right now. It's Samaritan Ministries. And I think, let's see what pops up SamaritanMinistries.org. And SamaritanMinistries.org. And I heard about this. I've been on it for a little over a year. We started in October of last year. And we've only had to use it once. We had I forget the total amount. It was around $1,000, and we ended up getting like $800 back or something after spending. We had to pay the upfront cost. So it does work. I mean, I from experience, have used the service, and I think they pay up to $125,000 is what they. And there's a level you can go beyond that, but that's what they say. We'll cover it up until. So they have a video. You can watch the video on it, and it's definitely Christian religion, a biblical non-insurance approach to healthcare needs is what they call it. So they don't call it insurance. But yeah, I can't say anything bad about it, and I love the fact that my money that I earn, and I don't mind helping somebody out, but it is almost like a charity that I'm giving to, but it's a charity that'll give back to me if I need it. And they're very. It's
like a co-op, like a shared type of a thing. It's almost
yeah. That's a good way of putting it. It is like a co-op. You put your money into it each month, and then when you need it, there's other people putting their money into it that are going to send money to you, and the people send you cards and stuff. We're praying for you. It's positive, very positive. Organization out there. It's what we need more of. And if we had our healthcare system structured like this, you wouldn't see the high rates that you have right now. You wouldn't see as many people strung out on prescription drugs. You'd see more people taking the responsibility for their health. Now people don't take responsibility for their health. They just, I don't need to watch what I eat. I don't need to worry about it. I've got insurance. They're taking care of me. It's sad. I mean, I've got friends that go in for multiple surgeries on backs and legs and stuff. But, a lot of it is, I think, mainly to just keep the pain pills coming. And it's sad. It's real sad. And I hate that, it's just one of the foils of humans. They like to feel good. And but Samaritan Ministries, I can't say enough good things about it. And yeah, and then there's another group out there. I don't know the name on the top of my head, but they do the same thing, and they don't require that you go to church. So they don't have like the religious type requirement there. So, but I don't know the name right now off the top of my head. But I'm going to do a report on both of them and try to get someone on from each organization just to talk about it a little bit and spread the word, because that's what I feel my job is to spread the word about this stuff. The fluoride in the water, the GMO stuff, to other people, to put videos out there that hopefully will 10 years from now somebody's going to click on it and learn something that, holy crap, I didn't realize that I'm putting poison into my body and I can filter it out. Wow, I didn't know that.
Rob, we hear a lot about the collapse, and there's so many different people out there that talk about it and report on it. And you get to the point. I know I have some days. I get to the point where I have collapse exhaustion. I've heard about the collapse so many times. I know you don't have a crystal ball. None of us do. Do you think we're as close maybe as some people say, or do you think we got some time? I know these criminals that run things, the Fed, they can print money and they can string things along for quite some time. If you had to give it within a 2 or 3 year range, we're looking within the next year, you think? Next 3-5 years? What's your feel on that?
I say prepare for the worst, hope for the best. Is that the saying, the way it goes?
That's a motto, I think. Yeah.
I'm a Eagle Scout. I'm prepared, and there's nothing wrong with being prepared. I don't think I'm prepared as I could be or as I should be, but I'm definitely prepared. I'm going to be better off than I'd say probably 80% of the population out there. But I used to think it was right around the corner. And especially when you get on some certain, sites out there and you're reading about prepping and why they're doing it. And yeah, you do think it's right around the corner. And as I've gotten older, I don't know. I don't know if I think what we'll see is pockets of stuff, more localized. And I don't think it'll be widespread unless it's something like a comet or a nuclear war. I don't think we're going to see, which could happen. Joel Skousen thinks it's 10 years off, a nuclear war with Russia. And, I hope that doesn't happen. I would hope the Russians wouldn't think that they could get into a nuclear war with us and one of them is going to survive, because I don't think anybody's going to survive. I think maybe somewhere in Patagonia you might make it, but personally, yeah, I used to think it was right around the corner, but I think if anything happens, it'll be a pockets of stuff where you'll have a disaster somewhere and people are going to be waiting for the feds to show up and they don't show up. Or if they show up, it's with the auspices of turn in your firearms and bring us all your storable food and then we'll help you out. Or, you have to leave your home and come into this area and we're going to take care of you. I think people need to learn how to take care of themselves. So if the event happens in your area, whether it be an earthquake or a flood or a tidal wave, that you have plans in place and, you got to have a battle plan. But I don't see anything taking out the country on a wide scale thing at this point. An EMP, but I don't even think that would take out the whole country. We're a big country and we're a lot of people. And I think there's a lot of crud on the surface, but there's a lot of good people in America, and I think there's a lot of good people all over the world that that know how to act right when times get tough. And I think you'll see people pull together. I think we do it all the time. And I'd say, hey, 6 months, get ready. And I've heard people say it, the collapse is coming, the collapse is coming, the collapse is coming. I've heard it. And I've prepared. I've heeded those warnings and prepared. But I don't think it's going to happen on a wide scale. I think it's going to be small areas where it'll be individual incidents. And, one of them could kick off this weekend with Ferguson, starting in Ferguson.
Rob, we're seeing unprecedented weather patterns that we just have never seen. It seems like California's become a sacrificial zone, while the Northeast is getting much cooler temperatures than normal, and a lot more, obviously. I mean, look at Buffalo, seems to be under 12 feet of snow at the moment, and here in Montana it seems like it's been negative 70 for the last week. But it's not within what has been normal weather patterns whatsoever. And then the NASA Jet Propulsion Lab came out talking about how the aquifers underneath California are not being replenished in any sort of way that's going to make it feasible to continue producing farming our produce. We're 70% of our produce in California.
Yeah, I think that's why they have the guys dumping the fracking water into the aquifers, right? And that to replenish them. That's a bad joke.
I don't know if that'll work out, but I mean, we're seeing droughts in California now where they've got to bus in little shower stalls for people to take a shower in the parking lot. It's just crazy, and it seems as if there's this Space Fest program that they've been talking about. Obviously the old HARP, and I know HARP's pretty old now. It's a couple generations back, according to Alana Freeland and some of the other experts we've had on the show.
Well, they say HARP is not active anymore too, which I don't know if I believe that, but they said they started dismantling it.
I think more than anything, it's just the technology has evolved into this new Space Fence project, and they're using it to electrify the atmosphere. But it does seem like they are doing something to the weather. Do you give much credit to this weather modification thoughts with the chemtrails and whatnot? I certainly think you can't look up in the sky and deny that there's something going on up there with the chemtrails and just the aluminum and barium levels that we're finding. What do you think's going on with all that?
Well, I think because you get so much pushback from people when you do bring it up, the scientific community is always hogwash. I think there definitely is something to it. I've seen it for myself. I've been out to California, visited Rosalind Peterson a few years ago, and just looking at the way the trees are, they just look like they're under attack by something. You'll see a bunch of nice-looking trees and then a bunch of dead ones. And these are not old trees. These are young trees that are just, out of the blue dying. And they're saying, well, it's a beetle. It's a pine bark beetle that's getting in there and getting them. And I don't know if I buy that. I'm sure that's part of it. But going back to the water in California, I mean, am I stupid, or is there a giant Pacific Ocean next to California, and why don't they have a water desalination plant? They have enough frickin' money in California. They're one of the largest economies in the world. You're telling me they can't build 10 desalination plants that for the cost of building one of those stupid rail projects that they want to do. And they do that in the Middle East. They've got enough money to make water there. You're telling me we can't do it here. We're too stupid in America to build a desalination plant. And, well, it costs so much money. No, it doesn't. It doesn't cost as much money. We could print the money, can't we? Can't we just print the money and make it happen? Can't the people of California decide they want to drink something? And so just hearing these people whine about their water predicament, they're standing next to the biggest body of water in the world. Why aren't they fixing the problem themselves? Why aren't they actively trying to do something instead of one thing they are doing is cutting off the water supply from the mountains. They've been doing that, and that's a plan. I think that's a plan to drive up the food prices. I think you're going to see a lot coming with Monsanto. Monsanto's buying up crop insurance companies and climate predictors. They're buying up people who are predicting weather patterns and stuff like that. And I think they're doing that, one, so they can corner the market on food supply and push out their competition. So, yeah, I definitely think geoengineering, weather modification, whatever name you want to call it, chemtrails, is definitely going on. And are they trying to, if they really think we're warming, well, then they're doing a great job, because we're definitely cooling. We definitely seem to be having cooler weather, more snow last year in some areas than have ever had. Buffalo's got all the snow that they normally get in a year. So I think you're seeing that across the board, especially up in the north. I mean, we got snow last year or was it the year before that in Austin? I'm expecting we're going to get snow this year because it was not a hot summer. And it seems like every other summer we get that's not hot or as hot as it normally is, we get a little bit of a dusting of snow. And I think it's definitely coming. And I don't think it has anything to do with SUVs and coal power plants, because the temperature was changing long before we arrived, and it'll be changing long after we're gone. And I don't think it has anything to do with SUVs and coal power plants. I think it's the sun, and it's the way the electrical field of the Earth works and the magnetic fields, the way they all work. And it's something that we don't fully understand at this point. Now, we can measure the weather, but we can't really tell you why things happen the way they do all the time. Although the weather people like to think they can.
Rob, do you think the obvious attempt to break the back of the middle class, it seems, by the government, do you think ultimately the goal is to place the population in a position of dependence? Because I know that you guys have had on Infowars, and you can probably attest to this. You guys have had storable food people on there that say the government's like their biggest customer. They come in and buy like the warehouse, or how many pallets full of food. They're storing, the government's storing the food for something. I mean, is it going to be where they want to break us to the point where we have to be dependent upon them? Do you think that's the ultimate goal?
It's a constriction. They're wrapping themselves around the middle class. They're like, we can feed off these people. They're working so hard right now to try to keep their head above water. They can't even get politically active. And so we've got the pressure from above, which is the government, and the pressure from below. This is an old tactic used by communists, essentially. I hate to call them communists, because not that I like communists, but it's this old. It's a system. It's an authoritarian system, and what they want to do is the middle class is the one thing they weren't able to control, and the one group of people that were engaged in their government. And by taking us out of the equation, are getting us on football issues of little or no significance, like gay marriage. I mean, I'm not affected if gay people get married. I don't really care if gay people get married, and I may be bad for saying that, but it doesn't affect me the way they're messing with the weather or genetically modifying the food. We didn't even get into GMOs yet, but those issues are bigger to me. Water fluoridation, stuff that really affects my health. And did I answer your question? I kind of got lost on track.
No, it's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
I sometimes I get on rants and then I start spacing out, trying to figure out or to pull things up. But yeah, I think the middle class is definitely under attack. And when in the city of Austin, all they do is raise the property taxes here. Every year it goes up, no matter what. House prices stay the same, property taxes go up. Property taxes go up. Benefits to large corporations go up. There's some companies here that don't pay anything for water, or don't pay anything for electricity, or don't pay any property tax for several years to get them here. And then when they start charging, or they start getting charged for these things, well, they close up shop and move. They're not stupid. They're the biggest recipients of welfare, some of these corporations. And you need jobs, but also, I mean, if you live here in this country, don't you want your country to be doing good? And we've seemed to have sold the country down the river for cheap Chinese plastic, and that was going on. That's been going on for years. Remember how things used to be made in Taiwan?
Yep. And
then they made in China, and that slowly happened. But now everything's made in China. You can't trying to find something made in Taiwan's even hard. And now trying to find something made in the USA, well, it's non-existent almost. So that's all part of the crushing the middle class, the getting rid of the factory workers. That's been a long, slow plan. And the unions, I think, are part of that to blame. I think those people got bought off and co-opted a long time ago. I think it's good for people to get organized to defend themselves, but what that turned into is a loyal opposition. They're funded by the same people. It's the old wrestling thing. Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant get paid by the same guy. They're not at war with each other. They don't care.
Rob, it seems like there's just so many things that can suck the life out of you when you're covering these stories constantly, and I know for myself that there are just days I get just down from all of this going on. But there's got to be those stories out there that really give you hope. Do you have any of those that have been happening lately that really make you believe that we can actually pull this off and there is some good in the world?
Well, I'm looking at one right now, and this isn't a big thing, but Jewett Academy principal suspended following last Thursday's lockdown drill. So the principal that did they had one of these active shooter drills, and nobody knew about it. And so the cops are running around with handguns, running around checking classrooms. Of course, they had unloaded AR-15s with no magazine, and they were pointed at the ground. But let me tell you, if you want to scare kids, right after a shooting incident, which we just had one, I don't know where it was, but it was in Colorado. It might be in Colorado. But now you've got these drills. You're going to freak people out. And so they suspended the principal for doing that. And then an article I covered yesterday, and I've got another one too, but this guy named, it's funny, his name is Sincerely Arneson, and he was a CEO of Landsbanki in Iceland. They only sentenced him to 12 months in prison, but at least they sentenced him. I mean, how many bankers have we put in jail?
None.
Yeah. And then I hate to be smile when I read this, but senior city banker found dead in bathtub with slashed throat. And I mean, I don't smile that this guy's dead, but there was no knife recovered at the scene, leading to officials to suspect the death was not a suicide. I laugh at that statement.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah, he used a melting knife. I mean, how do you how do you slash your throat? And apparently, it was after a night of partying and drinking, so he probably pissed somebody off, and he got knocked off for it. And who knows? Maybe he said he was going to talk.
Who knows? You know, we've seen so many dead bankers this year. It's hard to know.
Yeah. One of which, he wasn't necessarily a banker. He worked in the system. It was a friend of my wife's friend. It was her younger brother who died of the crazy. I think it was probably the same thing that took Alex's uncle, that weird respiratory thing that just came up and got him really quickly. And he was a healthy guy, but he did smoke cigarettes, I think. And, I mean, it got him, you know, first he was sick for a few days, and all of a sudden he's in intensive care, and then his organs shut down. And but he was working at J.P. Morgan, and, you know, these guys, I think they were, like, on him to like, be at work up until, you know, the day he went into intensive care. They're like, where are you? Where are you? You know, from what I've heard this from secondhand, so it may not even be accurate, but his sister is was investigating it for a while, wanting to know, how you could he could get so sick so fast, and it was probably the long hours that they're working. I'm not saying he was doing this, but in general, I think bankers are trying to screw people over out of their money. So I imagine that that's what most of banking activity is, especially in J.P. Morgan, and laundering drug money. So I think that's what these guys work on, and hiding their massive revenues, offshore. I think that's what a lot of these places are involved in. So, while those are small bright spots, and I guess you were talking earlier, and I went and looked up this company, the Lantern people.
Yeah, the outer net company.
Outernet.
That's pretty amazing stuff. I just set up to have one of their guys on the show here coming up, because I think that's just going to revolutionize getting information, especially if we have governments come down and clamp down on things. And for those of our listeners who may not have listened to yesterday's show when I talked about it a little bit, it's this little device. It looks like a little brick. Not too much bigger than like a Wii controller almost, and It's got its own solar cells, and you can plug in a cell phone to it. But basically, this device receives signals straight from the satellites because you have the outer net out in space, and you have the internet after it's come here and gets filtered by the governments and whatnot. So you have actual free access to information, and you can set up what you want it to download from different news sources, libraries, books, courses, and it's self-powering. It's always there, and it doesn't matter. A tsunami could come and wipe out your area, but if you've got this thing, you can still have connection to information. That to me, I think that's
exciting. An amazing piece of technology, and I'm excited about it. There's another group. Somebody sent me they're called Hydron. Hydro Infra Technologies, and it's a company they've been around a little while, but they come at it of, we're going to help combat climate change, but it's a nanogas. It's hydrogen nanogas that they create, that they mix with water, and it helps things burn cleaner. It can help clean up water. It's got a lot of different uses that I think are not BS. We're going to get rid of carbon. Even though they do talk about that a little bit, but I think that's a lot of jumping on a bandwagon. But I love seeing these new technologies. There's a company in Japan that invented a machine that can take plastic and turns it back into oil. So I tried to get the guy on. They didn't speak very good English, and we can never make the connection. But, you imagine all these, if you ever walked on a beach anywhere in the U.S. or Caribbean or wherever, there's plastic everywhere. And we've got in the middle of the ocean a giant floating plastic island. I mean, just imagine you're able to send a self-powering vehicle it's basically sucking up its own fuel source and powering around and cleaning it. We just let them go and clean it up, because there are a lot of areas where we've done wrong and we need to do better. And I like solar power. I don't know if giant solar farms are the answer, but I think taking the power and having it on a per home basis instead of these giant gatekeeping areas where they're going to control the power and send it out to whoever. No, I think we need to be in charge of our own power.
Well, here in Montana, it's pretty common. I mean, my dad's place, he's got 2 wind turbines and a solar array, and he generates all his own electricity. Everyone up his draw, the valley going up, same thing, because they couldn't afford to bring the power lines up. So that's just the way it is.
Right.
Hey, have you?
I think you're going to see that more. I think you're going to see more people do that as these power companies start. Well, they're getting overregulated, so they're having to charge more money. There was something where in Chicago, they're like, and it was this propaganda piece, like, oh, Mayor Rahm said he was going to clean up the environment. Now we're closing the last 2 coal power plants. Yeah, that might sound great, but guess what? Your power prices are about to go up, people. Yeah. They don't know that. They think it's all nice and great. Oh, we're going to have clean air to breathe, even though most of these things are regulated to where they have to scrub the stuff. And I'm not saying they don't pollute it all, But compared to nuclear energy, I'd rather have coal in my backyard than a nuclear power plant any day.
Yeah, and things are getting so expensive now. I mean, we literally are heating the front of our house with kerosene right now, and it's so much more efficient than our electric system that we have. So, I mean, we really got to rethink how we're doing things. Actually, going back real quick, another cool device that I found, or piece of technology. Have you heard of this Book of Life? It's a water filtration system that comes in a book, and you've got enough pages for a whole year. And what they do is each page is printed with, instructions on how to properly filter water and be, safe with water, how you drink it. And it's geared for third world countries, but you take a page out and you put it into this little container that comes in the book, and it's a day's worth of water filtration. I thought I went to the YouTube and to look at it, and of course we got an ad that popped up. But yeah, no, it looks pretty cool. Yeah,
I use things. I love the way new technology people are making, and the services where people are crowdsourcing their stuff. The guy building the hover car is crowdsourcing, or the hover bike. I mean, these are technologies that I think we can really be using instead of creating drones that kill people by themselves. But those don't seem to get any marketing or any. The government doesn't seem to care that people don't want to drive in traffic and would rather have hover bikes. That's not important. What's important is that we're all sitting in traffic, listening to NPR tell us how great the government is. That seems to be the impetus. But so you put this. Oh, it's got microscopic particles of silver. Huh.
Yeah, it's a cool little thing. I've got the set up to get them on the show eventually as well. We got to get that set up. But I thought that was a cool little device too. Yeah,
I use the ProPure system at my house, and my kids fill it up with water. I know how to fill it up with water. Great thing about it is it doesn't take electricity. And so any way you can remove something where lessen your dependence on the government, I think is something you have to do. And because don't depend on the government. Anybody out here listening to my voice, they're not going to help you. They're not there to help you. They're there to tax you and control you. That's their bottom line. But I love seeing new technologies come out, and and talking with people about them. And there's a lot of stuff out there on free energy websites. It just seems the people come out with this stuff, and then it always just kind of dissipates. It never really goes anywhere. I don't know if that's done by design or they get bought out or what. But I'm hoping we see these free energy devices come out where it's a home system. You buy your $2,000 power plant and you've got power.
I think a lot of it is they classify a lot of that stuff. Suddenly it's a national security issue because the guys figuring out how to really produce free power.
Yeah. And that's a shame. I mean, you would think if the government really had our best interests in heart, everybody'd have one of these systems. But
they do, Rob. Come on, don't be ridiculous. Do you see, the Tea Party came out and made a nice, strong showing here a few years back, and they kind of got sort of usurped by the Republican Party.
Karl Rove company.
Do you see going forward? There another, if not the Tea Party, another third party? Do you think it's time? Is the time ripe to break the two-party system? I've been voting third party for president at least. I think the second time Bill Clinton ran, I voted for Harry Brown, who was a libertarian. I think that's when he ran. And so I've always been into third parties. That is you're going against. I don't think they're going to fall as easily as the mainstream media is the Republican and Democratic establishments. When Ron Paul was running, I went in to try to be a delegate, and you go sit in these meetings and just listening to these people talk that are normal people like you and me, but boy, they buy the Republican BS line front and center, and anything else is conjecture or hyperbole or and it's amazing. But I think the
biggest problem with the Tea Party is they're not out there giving people free stuff, and I think that's where they probably, which people don't really want, but the people that seem to vote seem to like free stuff or think that they like free stuff. So, I mean, on a local level, I think there might be a chance to see some third party stuff. Nationally, I don't know. I think it's good that they run, but honestly, I think you're going to have to see places like what they're doing up in New Hampshire where people are moving to take it over. And I guess, that's kind of happening in Montana. Montana seems to be a gravitational hole for a lot of people who are freedom loving. I mean, how did you guys vote in this latest round of midterms? Did you guys get good people in your area, or that you think are going to do anything? Or
yeah, we actually did pretty well around here in Flathead Valley. Pretty much, more conservative. There's a difference, I think, Rob, between a Republican and a conservative.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm much more behind the conservatives. Just because they have an R behind their name doesn't necessarily mean, of course, that I'm going to start fawning all over them.
Right.
But we did pretty good here. I don't know how'd you do, Jason, down there in Butte?
We did all right. I mean, I voted for some conservatives that I thought were strong, and then the independents where I could. But I got to tell you, I'm losing faith in the system. I'm someone who's been, elected as an official on a county level. I've served on boards. I was the county coordinator for Ron Paul campaign. I also tried to go on and become a national delegate. I made it up to state and congressional. But even just seeing how those Ron Paulers were treated by the Republican Party afterwards and during, it was appalling. So, you had this motivated, dynamic, energetic group of very intelligent people wanting to just do as much work as they could to try to affect some change, and they were just stepped on.
Even Hillary Clinton came out and said she had never seen more ardent support for anybody ever in her life than she did with Ron Paul when she would go to an event. And, that says a lot to me. That says somebody who would never want to say anything nice to Ron Paul. And she did that while she was being grilled by Ron Paul over, I think it was Benghazi. She came out and said, I just got to tell you, I've never seen anybody support people like they did for you. And there was a huge support. And I think, Ron Paul got railroaded big time in both elections. And in 2008, they kept bringing in new front runners. It would be a new guy every week who's now the front runner, and then they would just fall off. But it was never Ron Paul. Ron Paul was never, even though he'd be first or second or third, they would never list him. And I remember there were spots where he won, and they wouldn't even list him. They'd list the second and third guy.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a concerted effort because they were afraid of somebody like him. And that's why, we've got a long way to go in order to get somebody into these positions. But, really, do I think the president has a lot of power? No. I think he's more ceremonial than anything.
Hey, I want to ask you one more question, Rob, and we're coming up to the end of the show. We want to give you a chance to talk about anything that you wanted to cover. Obviously give out your websites, anything else that you'd like us to put out to our listener base. But before that, I was wondering if you might be able to, have you been listening to the owner of Tesla, where he's so frightened about these robots that are...
Still there?
Yeah, are you not there? Oh. All right. All right. Looks like we might be back.
All right, I'm back. Last thing I heard was, did you listen, or have you listened? Is that what?
Yeah, have you heard the owner of Tesla, the electric car company, has been coming out and talking about the killer robots and how we may all be victim to them within 5 years. Have you been following that at all?
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I talk about a lot, actually, and I think they made him walk back those statements. It's now, I think you can even look. He's not walking back on them, but he's removed his statements from the internet. But yeah, I think probably the biggest thing in terms of a threat to our safety is these autonomous robots. And I think the drones, now that drones are operating domestically, first they weren't going to be domestic. Well, now they're just patrolling the border, or we're checking out farmers, see how much cattle they have, just for your safety. And next thing you know, these things have tasers and shotguns on them, and then it just keeps ramping up. So, yeah, I believe that statement. You're going to have killer robots in 5 years at the rate they're building them. And Google is cornering the market on robots. And you combine that with their mapping technology and their information technology, you're going to have some pretty badass Terminator robots to contend with. And it's something I worry about a lot. Yeah. And, we need to invent those from the horrible first Star Wars, Episode 1, the little balls that they threw at the droids to make them, to short-circuit them. So little EMP balls, I think, is what we have to invent. Now, we need to crowdsource. Somebody needs to come up with the EMP ball to destroy the drone or robot that's in your area.
Well, the Russians may have already come up with it. They just took out one of our destroyer ships with what seems to be an EMP-type attack.
Really? I didn't even see that. That's interesting. Did that just happen?
It was a couple days ago. It didn't get much coverage, but if you look for it, you'll find it. The sailors were so demoralized because they could do nothing that they had to have counseling. But apparently there was some sort of EMP event that shut down this entire ship.
Oh, yeah. Russian plane zaps U.S. warship's missile defense system.
Yeah. So, could be they've already got it, but I have faith in 12-year-old hackers across the world that no matter what technology we might come up with, they're going to find a way to hack into it and mess with it.
Yeah, I think so too, and that's part of the awesomeness of the web is the people that run around, the white hat hackers that run around and do their own brand of activism. We need people like that because you know what? I think there's more of us doing that than there are of them. Speaking of like the NSA, but the NSA's got a bigger budget and they're a little more centralized, so they can do a little more damage than we can. But finding your attack and only attacking when you know you can win, and I don't mean that in a violent way. I mean that in a Sun Tzu Art of War way, which is mostly be sure you have the information on your side and know that you can. Don't attack unless you know you can win. And that's where I think that the situation we're in, we're being put in that defensive posture. But it's good to have. But, the stuff we're doing now, I think is going to, in 10 years, people are going to be like, thank God there were people there talking about these issues. Thank God there were people bringing up this information. And, call them out on their tricks. Anytime you see the tricks, especially with, these false flag type events, we haven't seen one in a while since, Sandy Hook. I don't think we've seen that I can think of off the top of my head. I could be wrong, but, I think we're in a good spot where there's so many of us on the ground, they don't know who is who, and it's like Fight Club. You don't know, the guy across from you, the cop may be inside the group, and you don't know it yet.
Hey, first rule, you're not supposed to talk about Fight Club, Rob.
Exactly. I'm sorry.
Second rules: you're not supposed to talk about Fight Club.
Yeah. So
all right.
That's. I guess that we covered a pretty good groundswell of stuff on many different topics. And how's y'all's reach going? Are y'all getting a lot of feedback from people?
Yeah, I think our numbers were just today about 48,000 direct listeners just on the server, not on the FM and AM affiliates. So
that's great.
For being 5 months old, it seems like we're doing all right. We're trying to figure it out as we go, but you know how it is, starting something on your own. You're always trying to just figure it out.
Yeah, and that's the best way to do it. If I got any advice to give to people out there is not to try to make it perfect, not to try and wait for all the pieces to get set up in place. Just start doing something. Even if it's just picking up a camera and filming the ground and talking, start somewhere. Well, I got something I'll share with you real quick, and I think it's a sign of where we are going and what we are doing to our environment. My front porch seems to be a place where bees come to die. And the last month, I probably have, and I've been collecting them too, because I've been taking time photos of here's the first week, here's the third week, here's the sixth week. And I probably have 300 bees that have died on my front porch in the last month.
That's
A month and some days, yeah. And if you think about, well, I'm just one porch in the neighborhood of maybe 300 houses. How many bees have died over this last month in this little area, this small little area? But it really freaks me out that that the kind of stuff that we're doing to our environment, especially spraying, stuff like Roundup. They see those commercials, and you go into the big box stores, and it's everywhere, and people don't realize what that is. That is a chemical weapon meant to sterilize us, and I don't think people really believe that, or they don't know it, so they don't believe it. But those are chemical weapon systems, and they're attacking more than us too. They're killing the bees and whatever else.
What did Albert Einstein say? Without the bees, human life goes away. Paraphrasing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that hard to figure out.
No, I mean, the good thing is flies also pollinate, but flies are kind of nasty and they don't make honey. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was an honor having you on. You were definitely very influential in my awakening, and I appreciate all the work you're doing. And I just want to say thank you for what you're doing, and thanks for coming on Liberty Brothers.
Yeah, and I'll just give a quick plug to prisonplanet.tv. That's where you can see the nightly news every night, 7 p.m., and become a member. We appreciate everyone's support out there, and thanks for anybody out there who supports alternative media.
Thanks, folks. I appreciate you stopping by.
Thanks for joining us again on the Liberty Brothers. We'll be back tomorrow.
The world's changing quickly. It's not the world we grew up in. Not anymore. The media is lying to us. The government's lying to us. You don't know where to turn, who to trust. Well, I'm Jason Van Tatenhove, and I met my co-host, Jim White, going down to Bundy Ranch to take a stand and make a difference. Now, combining our efforts in a new radio show where we bring you the truth, we bring you the Constitution, we show you how to get prepared. We want to do our part to reach out to the citizens of this great country to help make it great again. Join us weekdays on Revolution Radio, on the Liberty Brothers Radio Show.